Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Shop Talk, hosted by the Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group. So tonight you can see that we have quite an odd number of people. That is because special guest star Tom Norman. How you doing, Tom?
I'm good, Kevin. How are you?
Doing fantastic. It's been a minute since we've gotten to see Tom, ever since he went to the lakeside.
The land of Texas.
Yeah, the lakeside house and enjoying that porch.
I'm enjoying the porch. I went jet skiing yesterday, so I acquired. You didn't even hear. I've actually acquired a jet ski since we last met and probably talked. So yeah. So
It is good. It is good to have a jet ski in your life.
it is good.
Rounding out the rest of the crew, we've got everybody else, all of the regulars. So next to Tom, we've got Mala. How you doing, Mala? That sounds fantastic, although you are on mute, so it probably sounds better on your end.
Doing very well. Good evening, everyone.
Continuing this anti-clockwise tradition, we have Tracy. How you doing, Tracy?
Great.
And at 12 o'clock high, Mike.
Select hello.
All right, so Shop Talk, in case this is your first time here, the idea is it's Monday, work is over, hopefully. Time to hang out at the relatively virtual water cooler and shoot the breeze. Talk about topics. If you have questions, we might have answers. And we've got a few topics to cover tonight. But of course, this is chat driven. Chat, you are the best. It's time to show it. Looking forward to my next OS not to be Windows 11. Yeah, so my laptop is Elementary OS, which the only thing is that it kind of looks like Mac OS. But if you avoid that, if you ignore that part, Elementary is a great Linux distro. Mint, I don't know. I just never liked Mint very much. I would very happily go back to Mandrake if it still existed. But that's probably because I live in a world of nostalgia.
I'm finally getting used to Windows 11, so I hope they don't improve it too much.
So Andrew says for home use, it's Mint all the way. I do hear nice things about Mint. It just never caught on with me. I will just use stock Ubuntu or Elementary. So yeah,
I'm going to be openly dumb, Kevin. The only Mint I know of is the food-related term. So what is this about?
Well, you see, you mix it with chocolate chips and you get some great ice cream. Mint is a distribution of Linux that is based off of Ubuntu. And so it's intended to be pretty easy to work with, intended to be pretty easy to work to connect with consumer hardware. So great for desktops, reasonably good for laptops, generally better for slightly older equipment where there's been time to make drivers for all of the different hardware components. And typically you're going to get much better support on desktops. But that said, if your laptop's a couple years old, you can usually run with no problems on a fairly common Ubuntu-based distribution like Ubuntu itself, Lubuntu, Mint, Elementary. There are certain laptops that are specifically designed where all of the components are well supported in terms of Linux-based drivers. The Framework laptop is my favorite. It's the one that I've got here. Worked great on the old laptops we retired at the previous employer. Exactly. Right. That's one of the classic use cases for Linux on a laptop is, well, your laptop's getting a little old. It's not going to run the latest version of Windows very well at all. So try to give it a couple more years of life.
I was going to say the reason you don't like Windows 11 is because you don't have a laptop that will run it.
Yeah, my Windows 11 works great. Just saying.
So my desktop is not powerful enough to run Windows 11 because it only has 128 gigs of RAM and 40 cores.
So, so does it not have the chip that it's looking for? That whatever that chip is.
Yeah, it actually does have the chip, but I've disabled it because I don't want to upgrade to Windows 11.
He's
So it's
being
just funny seeing that.
Good.
He can run.
Yeah,
it.
I love seeing that screen. It's like, your computer's not powerful enough to run Windows 11. I don't know about that one.
The most powerful computer you can get.
Well, it's like my laptop. Remember, my laptop is 64 gigs of memory and what 12 cores and 2 terabytes of hard drive space with NVMe drives. So yes, you can dual now if you actually go do presentations.
That's not a laptop. That's an availability zone in Azure.
Yes, it is. But no, it happens to be my laptop also. So sweet ride.
So yeah, Milo, that's the rough idea of what Mint is. It's just a pretty easy to get started with distribution of Linux based off of Ubuntu.
Okay, so I want to know why you're dissing Windows 11. Why do you want to stay away from Windows 11?
In my case, a couple of things. One is that I have seen the painful efforts with versions of Windows and how it takes usually a couple of years before the operating system ends up not sucking. So I don't really have a desire from that standpoint. Having seen Windows 8, Windows 8.1, Windows 10 the first couple of years. And in addition to that, I don't think there's anything in Windows 11 that I'm looking at where I say, boy, I really need this in my life.
What Kevin said, and after Windows 10, I'm not a fan of the learning curve that a simple OS needs to
Yeah,
get used to. I just don't have the bandwidth for that.
It has some extra clicks for sure. So some things that you're used to doing in a certain way have a couple extra screens you got to go through.
Yeah. That's what I hear, is that there is a learning curve, and I'm like, okay, this can wait.
it's interesting because I have Windows 11 on my personal laptop and I've got Windows 10 on my work laptop. So it's
I'm just used to it. It doesn't bother me.
I would do Windows 7 if they let me, but they don't. So
well, why not just go to XP? You know, Windows XP. Now if you can go back.
I don't know. I don't know that one. I'm only 26. I wasn't around for that.
I guess you must not have been.
I'm
What
kidding.
is XP?
I wish I
Huh?
was 26.
What's he
Do what?
talking about? That sounds foreign.
XP? Did you know
Yeah.
Windows XP? Kevin, am I being foreign? Come on, I've got the right name, I think.
Yeah. So
No, you do.
okay.
You do.
You're right, Tom.
Just messing with you.
I'm
Right,
like
but
going, I'm not that old. Come on.
No.
Yeah,
So the
pretty fair, but
the
I'm not
funny
that
thing
old.
is, if this weren't a question about, like Mike points out in chat here that XP has way too many holes in it. Yeah, if the fact that there hasn't been a security update for it in 12 years, if that wasn't a factor, if everything was fully patched up, ready to go, and it was simply the interface. If it was just the windowing interface that was different, everything else behind the scenes, you got Windows Subsystem for Linux 2, you get the newest versions of PowerShell, of .NET support, yada yada. If you supposed all of that under the covers was the same and it was simply how everything gets presented to you, I think a bunch of people would still go with XP. I think 7 was an improvement over XP. The ability to, for example, search in the taskbar was a big improvement. Now, the problem is, ever since 7, they've made it steadily worse to where you can search in a taskbar and it won't work correctly the first time. And, let me delete and retype in. Or it'll try to do web searches or do other weird things that you don't want if you
And
don't.
You can't turn it off.
You can.
Easily.
You can
It's
turn
hard
those
to
things
turn.
off. Yeah, if you turn off the smart search, you can have it search specifically in applications. But basically, I think that if you did say, if you made it explicit that all of the underlying internals were exactly the same, it was simply the windowing interface, a whole bunch of people would choose XP still. And a whole
So
bunch of
I
people
don't
would
know
choose 7.
why SSMS has a file search in it, but it does, and I love it. It doesn't come with any of this weirdness, and it works really well for me since I discovered that.
But this is not a world we live in, so them's the breaks, I guess.
I can. Ooh, am I echoing?
Well,
Wow.
Mike, you're driving under a tunnel.
Weird.
Sound okay to me. So,
Yeah, no, you're okay. You just internet connectivity issues.
yeah.
So
Good
catching up a little bit on chat here. Why do we keep needing more hardware for the OS? Because for the purposes of software development, people want shinier, nicer things. And to get shinier, nicer things, it takes more compute cycles. Also, we tend to trade compute efficiency for time of development and ease of reading code, which means that you get like 800 megabyte node packages built from Electron instead of a 1 megabyte assembly program. I mean, I'm exaggerating, of course, but that is actually the most common trade-off. It's developer time and efficiency, and its capacity for additional shiny.
Actually, we were just talking about that today a little bit at work, in the fact that, looking at possibly going to Azure, lift and shift, of course, not actually rewriting the apps to be more cloud specific, but it was interesting because when I look at, extended advanced profile or whatever, a lot of our queries, I'm like telling my boss, I see select star. I see them bringing back way far more data than they really need. And I'm like going, do you have a platinum credit card when you take it up there? Because it's going to cost you, and it's that time of development, instead of coding for what's on the screen, they just pull back the entire table. Well, we might need this data.
Yeah. And, following up, Mike, you're saying, okay, that's software development. Many people don't do development. Yeah, sure. But software development drives hardware requirements. And that's what I'm getting at, that you have this need for more power because people want nicer things. The Arrow interface, for example, from Windows 7 that has carried on since then, that was a huge hardware burden in terms of you need a graphics card that supports it. You need sufficient RAM, yada, yada. You can run programs on field programmable gate arrays that have megabytes of memory. I mean, you could still run PDP-8 and do PDP-8 stuff that you could do in the 30, 40, 50 years ago. All right, 40 years ago. But you're not going to run a modern operating system on that because of, well, 64-bit addressable memory. So you're going to need a lot more memory to be able to support anything, because now all of your pointer calls need to be able to handle 64-bit. Number 2 is the expectations of what the operating system is supposed to do. And that's in terms of background processes. That's in terms of multitasking capabilities. It's in terms of, I want to be able to run an entire Linux distribution from my Windows machine. Well, needs more resources for that. And even stuff that's under the covers that's secretly running those that Linux distribution. For example, if you're using Docker for desktop, well, probably using WSL for that. And that's going to take quite a bit of hardware capacity. Many of us in IoT still do run high-tech software and minimal hardware. We just don't let NSA mine coin on them. Yet you also have very specific purpose-built software that is intended to solve one thing. It's not a general purpose computing system which is intended to solve everything. I mean, that's the one of the things that Cory Doctorow goes on about, that, hey, I have here a computer that I could do literally anything with. If I can program it, it can do it. Versus something that is very finely focused on doing one thing. And if it's IoT, one thing fairly poorly. But that's my little jibe at IoT. It sends data into the cloud that you don't want sent into the cloud.
Oh, come on. Don't you want to know how many times I open my refrigerator door, or how my temperature is over the deal, or I need to clean my dishwasher,
Yeah, no, okay. And also I do know that there are gateways that will that are intended for within home, and actually I prefer that by far. The idea of going out to the cloud for those types of messages is just, it infuriates me that is the standard method. Like, it should be, you have some controller in your house and all of that IoT traffic happens within that controller, and then you're able to communicate with the controller. You shouldn't have your television reaching out to display your viewing habits or displaying advertisements to you, but that's just going to lead to a rant.
Yeah, I got an email, in fact, just today telling me, you opened your refrigerator door too many times for last month, but you did real well on how much water you drank out of the indoor water faucet. So you saved a lot of water bottles.
I am going to bite my tongue really hard right now to keep from saying something that is entirely inopportune, but it would start with, this is why I don't have a IoT driven refrigerator.
About things like fitness watches and that kind of stuff, Kevin, should that also be local in your opinion? Like, I wear a sugar monitoring now, a CGM, and I know everything goes to the cloud, and I have no control over that.
I've got a new device for you, Kevin, that I'm hooking up right now that's IoT in the house, and that's an IoT at faucet water sprinkler system. So it'll basically, I can drive it with, it won't water when it rains because it determines that the weather it's going to be raining where you are, so it will not water that night. You don't have to have some device that you hook up to have water fall in to basically say that it rained. I see Mike smiling, like going, I need one of those devices for my water in my yard.
Yeah, again, that's all useful stuff, but the fact that it's going out to the internet, the fact that it's going out to some service provider, that's the part that gets to me, because a couple of reasons. One is, we're now bankrupt, so that thing you spent $500 on that you thought was yours, it's not going to work anymore. Yeah. That's problem number one. Problem number two is the weekly email that, our service has been hacked, but don't worry, none of your personal information has been stolen, just exactly where you're at, what your habits are, and where if somebody was actually interested in finding out about your personal life, they would find a whole lot of information. But it's okay. We're going to give you 1 month of credit monitoring.
I got that today. I got it from Wells Fargo.
So are you saying, Kevin, you're talking to an encryption guy now. Are you saying that there's such a thing as data privacy? Really? Is there such a thing as data privacy anymore?
Not with smart monitors. You can't opt out of that.
Not anymore, because I mean.
So get this. Okay, I am about 6 to 7 months away from turning 65, and so is my wife. And we're now getting an abundance of email basically saying, hey, you need to use us for Medicare. You need to use us to sign up for Medicare. Hey, you need to use us for... We're getting at least 2 or 3 pieces of mail a day on trying to get us to use them for
Do you keep
Medicare.
track of how many places you have to put in your date of birth, Tom?
Oh, yeah. I've got a password program that shows me where I'm at. That's why all my credit reports are locked, so nobody can go out there
No,
and
that
steal
part
it.
is okay. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
wherever we go, even when we change jobs, we give out, literally tons of information on who we are and all kinds of stuff. I mean, if any ex-employer got hacked, I'm sure all my stuff would go with it.
It's
Like
like
my social, how much money I was making, my date of birth, and everything.
Oh yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's funny, but it's funny when I taught the encryption class because I basically said all these GDPR and California Privacy Protection Act, all those guys, basically the cart already left the barn a long time ago. The data's already out there. I could tell you 20 years ago what you were buying on your credit card, and stuff. So the data's already gone, and there's no way you're going to be able to pull it back in. It's just out there. Your personal information's out there, and you're sunk.
Right.
Yeah, but on the plus side, everybody's data models are so bad that all that data is useless. So,
then how come how come I'm getting 3 to 4 letters a day about my Medicare, signing up for Medicare?
So, Tom, for the same reason that I get 3 to 4 letters a day to sign up for Medicare, I've been getting sign up for Social Security, sign up for the AARP ever since I was 17.
Yeah.
They followed me. It's like, you know what? I'll join the AARP. I'll get my 10% discount at Bob Evans. I don't know. Like,
I think they're.
I'm just retiring early.
Do what?
I think there was a really deep analysis on how poor some data sets are. That it was either Wall Street Journal or New York Times where they did a deep dive on the data that some of these companies actually have that do profiling on you, and that a lot of it is absolutely wrong.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I would more question of, okay, who sold my data to those places? Like we found a few years ago, Nexum or Nexus? Some company out there I've never heard of in my life. They have everybody, a bunch of people's data, and I'm like, going, who in the world is this company? So you really have no clue where all your data is.
Yep. Oh, there's also fun stories where, as much as my cynical joking about everybody's data model is so bad that, hey, at least they know that your data is wrong. There was a session at Analytics Forward a few years back where the presenter, she had recently had a child and pointedly made sure not to mention anything related to it to anybody online. Did not do any online shopping for baby supplies, didn't do anything like that. That was all in person, paid in cash. That had anything to do with children. And shortly before she gave birth, she posted something, or somebody posted something on Facebook and tagged her that indicated that she was about to deliver, and suddenly starts getting swamped with advertisements for nurseries, for children's stuff. All this stuff that she wasn't getting started getting as soon as that one little Facebook post hit, which that is it's a little creepy, but that's one of the ways that people do get information. There's a lot of scraping of data that people give away freely from Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, any sort of social network. Anything that you're giving out, I mean, you kind of have to assume that's now public information. And the real moral quandary in there was she wasn't the one who gave it out and didn't really want it to be given out. And yet, because somebody else gave that information, now that information is out there. And that's a pretty tricky data privacy question. If it's you giving out the info, yeah, guess what? You put something on a social network, people are going to be able to see it. That's the name of the game.
So do you ever think that with all the government laws out there and stuff that's coming coming out or trying to come out or whatever, do you ever think that there ever will be quote unquote data privacy, where your data is truly private if you want it to be? And I think, and Mike's right, in shaking his head that that's never going to happen.
No.
Not even with your children, because as soon as you even sign up for a social security number for your child, as you have to, the government sells your data.
Yes.
I guess it depends on the definition of data privacy. Because, yeah, there's public records. You know, for example, I buy a house. That's public information. So technically, yeah, that's never going to be private because it is required to be public information. There's a lot of stuff that is social, like social security numbers. That registry, I don't think is even sold. I think it's simply made available. The Postal Service, when you change your address, they might sell that information in a digest form, but it is publicly available and is intended to be sent out so that, you know, people who knew to mail you at this location now know to mail you at this new location. But I guess it depends on what you define as data privacy. And in a very strict sense, you're right. No. If you're providing information to be made available and that information is saleable, then it will be sold. If it is public record, then it will be public, and the enterprising person is going to collect that public information and find a way to sell it some other way. And so for those aspects, no, there's no concept of data privacy. The tricky part from a moral standpoint is that the laws that have been in place around public records stemmed back from the day where if I wanted to learn about who owned this plot of land, I had to go down to the county courthouse, open up a large book, and find the plot in that book, and then say, oh, okay, that's what that looks like. And the convenience of that information being online is, well, I don't have to go down to the county courthouse. The inconvenience is anybody can go grab that information, when 30, 40 years ago, that would not have been a practical solution.
Right. So it's kind of like, you know, if you want to be off the grid, you know, there's no such thing as probably really being off the grid and someone does not know about you.
Right.
In some fashion or whatever, because you're going to, even if you're paying cash totally for something, you'd have to have no bank account, no credit cards, you know, solar, wind, whatever. Yeah. But you're still going to be known because you bought that piece of property there. Your name is on that piece of property that you're setting in.
Well, you can do, I mean, not to get off topic, but if you have wealth, I mean, you can have a company buy it or somebody else buy it in your name.
Sure.
Our neighbor is it's an Airbnb. It's just a neighborhood, but that is a company, and you would be hard pressed to figure out who owns that house.
Yeah.
All
anyway.
right. Catching up on chat. There's been a lot of chat during this discussion, so I think you hit a good topic, Tom. Andrew says, my dryer keeps track of how many dryer sheets I have left. And Mike's counter was, do you need to buy dryer specific sheet cartridges? With printers? Yeah. A new major printer that's killed cartridges. Yeah, so Canon had an issue where their firmware caused some type of massive failure to the point where they had to disable their tracking of are you using legitimate Canon cartridges, which I'm waiting for that concept eventually to be banned in a court ruling. I would expect at some point there's going to be a anti-competitive action lawsuit that eventually clears and says you can't you can't force someone to use your brand cartridges in a device if it's not intended. Like if that's intended to be swappable, user replaceable, then you have to be able to support others. There are some rules in place where they make it more difficult for a company to, like a company like Canon can't take legal action against you for using improper cartridges, but they can still try to write firmware and block you from using those rogue cartridges that don't cost 40 times what they should. So you likely have a chipped refrigerator. Yeah, there is a circuit board that is in my refrigerator. Yes, but it does not connect to the internet.
You have to connect it to the internet.
I don't have a IoT driven refrigerator.
Oh.
I don't have a model that would support it. It was pre that phase. And Mike's got a really good point that if we don't pay for the service, we are the product. Yeah, that's the general rule, that if you are not the buyer, you are the product.
Well, it's interesting on the refrigerator. I do not pay any additional money besides just connecting it to the internet. I pay no additional money for them to monitor and tell me what's going on with the refrigerator.
Right, they're selling that information.
Yeah, they are.
Well,
they're selling it from the standpoint of, look how long this guy has had his refrigerator up, and it's been working for X number of years.
Oh, that's not the info that's most likely to be sold. Anders says, I should start to work for someone to clean up all the stolen data. I mean, you could. There are companies, and I wouldn't even say, well, okay, yeah, that was on the idea of stolen data, which, enterprising souls. Let's see.
I would like to see someone turn around and go to California, if you lived in California or GDPR, and basically turn around and say, I want my data erased. Yeah, you probably would never have it fully erased.
Oh, no. And so if you look into the rules, it's not that you have the right to have all of the data erased. It's that data which is no longer business relevant be erased. So I can't go to my cell phone company and say, erase my name from your records. I don't want to have my name in your records. If I were no longer a customer of theirs, then I could contact them and say, yeah, I want my information erased. But that is it's more of a cheap masking.
But from a legal standpoint, if I needed to file a lawsuit against you because you had this phone number and you were harassing me, and I decided I was still within statute of limitations. If I needed to file a lawsuit against you, then basically they have to still have that record around.
Yeah, so that's a potential business consideration. There's also any sort of legal concerns, and it is very easy to make the business argument that we need to retain quite a bit of information for years after the fact because of possibility of lawsuits.
Yeah.
I'm gonna skip over this whole blockchain shenanigans because nope, you're not dragging me down that road today.
You don't want to talk about blockchain, huh?
No, not at all. Not at all. Daily emails, SMS, and calls to sell their house. We pay cash. I mean, we're going to pay like 40% of what the house is worth, but we'll pay in cash. Call lawyers if you need to protect a public record. If there is legal grounds for that protection. And yeah, this is where, Mike here was talking about, well, you can have property be bought in the name of a business. You could have a trust set up. You can you can go through legal avenues and have private organizations make purchases on behalf of individuals and make it more difficult for the average person to understand what's happening. So yeah, there are factors. Now, how many people are going to do that when they're buying a house? 1,000th of 1%.
Well, and then you get the other aspect of it. It can become challenging if you decide to turn around and sell it, because then you've got to get people in the corporation and stuff to sign off.
Yeah, and there are private trusts. Private trusts are useful for quite a few things. I'm not going to talk about one of the most important uses of private trusts, but not on Shop Talk. But there are good uses for private trusts in terms of what you can make it so that there's at least one level of indirection or two levels of indirection. Let's see. The target story. Yeah, so Mala mentioned the target story. Mike here mentioned the target story as well. I guess I'll have to switch back to Lysanki and Mike so that we can separate the two, disambiguate. But yeah, the target story was a really interesting one, and that was where, if you don't remember this was actually a decade ago at this point, and the gist of the story was that teenage daughter had gotten pregnant. She didn't know.
It wasn't a decade ago, Kevin. It was maybe 5 or 6 years.
I want to say it was about 2012. The one that I'm thinking of.
I can look it up, but go on. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go on.
Yeah, so teenage girl didn't even realize that she was pregnant, but based on some of the purchases that she had made, the ML process that Target was using indicated, oh, we think she's pregnant, and so they started sending out mailers with coupons for baby products. And that's when her father, with whom she was still living at the time, realized that, wait, why are we getting all of these things about pregnancy? And then she ended up getting a test and finding out that, yeah, she's pregnant.
Oh, wow.
So you were right, 2012. Boy,
yeah.
Seems like time has flown. Yeah.
They did sue Target, and Target did have to pay damages for it. Yes. DMCA caused all kinds of problems. You're right, Lysanki. Absolutely. DMCA is a mess, and was an attempt to try to solve a finesse problem with a sledgehammer, and they missed. John Deere tractors, farmers get charged for the farm data that they generate with those tractors. Yep. And there's a whole argument in the world of right to repair, of right to actually own property, around the idea of these combines, these harvesters, these tractors, these $500,000 pieces of equipment that I have purchased. I should own the thing, and it should not be that I'm leasing it until John Deere says, nah, it's not good anymore, and then I can't use it anymore. Which is the same thing with IoT, where, oh, well, this product, company went out of business. Sorry, you can't use your product anymore. That thing that you were relying on, that doorbell, that lock on your door, that device that controls your lighting. Nope, can't do it anymore.
Well, what about, you're talking about those type of things, but what about software as a service now? You're talking about things like, for example, I got a notice the other day that my Quicken that I use for financial purposes turns around, it's now on a yearly service contract, right? So,
yeah, Adobe
too. Yeah, Adobe's that way, and there's several others that, one day we could very well be, oh, sorry, we went out of business, we went bankrupt, and now all of a sudden you can't really use your software anymore or whatever.
Yeah, that is a model that a lot of companies are trying to go to, because it's moving from single purchase to regular subscription. And the shareholders do love the regular subscription because that is a predictable model. So I have a certain percentage of people. I know that I'm going to have some inflow, I'm going to have some churn, and I can pattern out based on monthly and annual subscriptions that this is my cash flow. With box product, if you're releasing it every 2 years, every 3 years, that is a higher risk scenario, especially because somebody who bought the box product 9 years ago and is still happy with that version, they don't have to change. They don't have to pay you more unless you're Adobe, in which case they were trying to force you to buy keys every year. But
then we go back to Windows XP. We could just stay on Windows XP forever.
Well, and I've thought about this a bit, and I like to listen to some like podcasts about like startups and small time developers that make apps and kind of have a job where they support 1 or 2 apps in like the Mac store or and it's a life changer for them, and they're able to actually make quit their jobs and like start a small business. But at the same time, when you have a large company like Adobe and let's say you bought a persistent license in 2012 or 2017, and then they no longer support this persistent license that you bought for $999 like 5 years ago, that's where I get a little frustrated. I think that I don't mind the subscription model because I think it can be beneficial, and that bugs and feature enhancements are very valuable, and that security enhancements that you need to fix like Log4j need to be done. But at the same time, like I think that some corporations take advantage of it.
Yeah, it's like everything. There's trade-offs involved, and I don't know. My preference is have physical product, because at least with physical product, it's going to be there tomorrow. The disk may break, the disk may decay, things may fail over time, but at least I know I still have it, that if it fails, it's going to be, I did something wrong, or this thing is just gotten too old or something, versus, oh, well, this company got merged with this other company, and now the product that you relied on for your workflow, you can't use it anymore. But if you upgrade to our premium tier for just $20 a month more, you'll get 80% of the features you had.
Well, the other aspect would be, as we talked about that, is like the Quicken I was just talking about. I actually have an exe that I've installed on my computer. So if they went out of business, I'm still good. I can still use it. I may not have any of their features if I was going to their features in the cloud, but Adobe, some of their features, aren't they only cloud-based, that you can only do things if they're in the cloud?
Oh, yeah.
That you don't have an exe, that's where you have a real problem. If you have we sell our software basically as a cloud-based type of solution. And, if we went out of business, then, those customers are stuck. But I'm sure that there's contractual stuff that I don't know about that basically, you'd have to read the fine print and say, okay, per this contract, if you go out of business, then X happens with the software and how it's handled at that point.
Yeah, usually there will be provisions, but some of those provisions are basically, we'll support you until your contract runs out, and that's it. Software as a service is most certainly a double-edged sword. It has great utility and makes things very easy to get started with, but then as you become reliant on this thing, it becomes a risk. That risk is that company may not be there tomorrow. Now, will they be there tomorrow? You know what? Most likely. But there's that risk that you're taking. Even with installing Quicken on your desktop, that installed version of Quicken, there is still functionality like linking bank accounts that they regularly break on old versions, where you get to do it for 2 years, but then these automated links aren't going to work anymore. or they're not supported anymore. And then when the bank changes their process for their API, then you're not going to get the new version of code that supports it.
Right. I don't trust them anyway. I've seen them mess up my bank account too many times.
Well, and on the database stuff, I've tried some newer stuff like Airtable, and there's something called If This Then That, which is kind of like an automation IoT service, and that I think went out of business. And then there's a new company, Zapier, that is a very well regarded company, but like they might not be around forever. So they do tons of automations that are things that this group would do, where, you automate an email from the database for clients, or a SQL Server agent does a task. So you can do these things with, clicking boxes in Zapier, but Zapier goes away, and they also have all your data.
Yeah. If This Then That is still around, but Zapier is something that I use pretty regularly. And as I'm saying this, also note that I make use of a lot of software as a service products. I work for a company that does software as a service, and understanding it as this is in many cases an acceptable risk, but it's still a risk you have to understand and realize that in certain cases, this thing may go away tomorrow. Like I use a service for my to-do lists, and that's a very important thing for me. I have 212 items on my to-do list right now, so it's important to keep those organized. They're not all due right now, but if that company went belly up tomorrow, that would kind of suck. And if I didn't have an opportunity to get my data out of there, that would be even worse. But it is a risk that I've decided, I'm willing to take because of the convenience of having this be available on all machines at once.
Well, and that's the whole thing of anything on the mobile phone, right? Any applications on the mobile phone that tie to your desktop or whatever the case may be, that's just a risk that you hopefully you and I, as technology people, we understand that. But if you told my brother or someone that's non-technical that could happen to them, they'd like go, "Oh no, that can happen." I'm like, "Oh yeah, it can. They could go out of business." So.
Yeah, and there are huge upsides to it as well, where we're streaming over Twitch. Twitch is a software as a service offering for streaming services. I'm using Whereby for having the 5 of us here. Whereby is software as a service. It's all hosted somewhere else. Could I technically put all of this together, make it available? Yeah, I could. I mean, OBS Studio can stream. I could have some sort of endpoint and try to point people at it and host servers and do all of this work. That's a huge amount of work for something that is not I don't think any of us are making money here on this. I mean, Mike's making a lot of money on it, but that's just in his contract. The rest of us, we don't get all the money. So that definitely lowers the barrier to entry to the point where, all right, yeah, you know what? I can afford to have my company buy a license to Whereby for a year and host this stuff. I can afford Twitch is free. Again, that's free because, yeah, they take your data and Amazon takes that information and does all kinds of stuff with it. But that is the other side of things, that we could get this stream going in a way that, frankly, I never would have done if I had to do all of that myself. So almost worse than them going away is when they change their interfaces or endpoints. Yeah, sure. And sometimes those API changes are sudden, drastic, and breaking. And they'll be like, "Oh, well, you have 0 days to change this because we just released the new version." It's
hey, if you only have 0 days, that's good. It's when you find it a week or two later and you're like, "Well, why did it break?" And then you hear about it and you're broken for 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, no, that's right. Well, and a lot of times they don't tell you the breaking changes. It's kind of, that broke.
Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just bad API development. I understand you don't necessarily want to have APIs backward compatible to the end of time, but usually you want to have a pretty long leash on, how long older endpoints will still work, at least at a degraded state, before they just break. Solomon mentions it's good to export or backup that software as a service data on occasion. Yeah, for sure. And
Absolutely.
yep, as long as you can. Gets tricky with some things like Gmail, but yes, if it's reasonable to back the thing up, it's a good idea too, especially if it involves money, if it involves finances, etc. Goodreads changed their data feed from owners. Oh, go ahead, Tom.
Photos.
Oh yeah, photos. Yep.
Personal photos.
Well, I just learned a hard lesson. Like, I had purchased a drive that was 5 terabytes, and that I was periodically using it for media, and I didn't realize it was really just an archiving disk. So I looked at the smart statistics, which I wasn't really aware of, and it was like it had like 9% life left or something like that. So I was kind of I had it kind of constantly plugged in, and it's not that kind of drive, and I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So now I have like a NAS with like specific type drives, but like I'm glad that I even was thinking about backing stuff up, because otherwise I'd be in big trouble.
Yep.
So
Anderson,
I just pay and let the cloud do it,
So Andrew says Goodreads changed their data feed from their owners, Amazon. Suddenly, about 300 books I'd read showed up as not being read. Yeah, that's on the benign side of things got screwed up. At least you still had the books afterward. That is where you get to even bigger things, where I bought the thing, but I no longer have access to it, which is part of why I've gone on a craze where I'm buying all physical media. So instead of buying digital movies, it's all physical disc. And part of that, a little bit of that is paranoia. A bit of that is I know how this system works, and that thing that you bought 5 years ago, we're out of business now, too bad. Or we've changed our terms of service, you no longer own a copy of it. You were leasing a copy, you were leasing the ability to view this in your own home, and now we have revoked that.
Or they don't print it anymore. We were looking for like, it was a terrible movie, Death Race 2000, but like it's not printed anymore. Like you can't get it. So I went on to eBay, and it was like $37 for a copy of this not very good movie, right?
Part of it is that's all who the publisher is, and does the publisher still around? Does anybody have rights? What does the demand look like? So yeah, there can be movies that it could be very difficult to find a copy of that in any format. Where you might be, I'm looking for some bootleg VHS of some movie, because that's all that they've got. It was never released to DVD because it was that bad. Like
the original TV of V, or the Reptile guys. And
plenty of movies like that, because I love classic movies. So I know plenty of movies that didn't make it into the Blu-ray DVD world.
Yep. Now on the good side of that, this is Mike's definitely on the fun side of it. These are really cheesy movies that are fun to watch with other people. On the really good side of it, there are companies dedicated to restoration, archiving, and selling, like the Criterion Collection, that do a really good job of bringing back these classic films and making them available. Actually, guilty pleasure here. We got a copy of the Shaw Scope Volume 1, which recently came out. So the Shaw brothers, who were big in the Hong Kong Kung Fu movie scene, and the movies were classically cheesy. cheesy for sure, like low budget, all kinds of craziness, released under 3 or 4 different titles in the US at different times, that kind of movie. And you see these getting lovingly restored. Library of Congress should have a copy of anything that's been copyrighted. I think technically they do, but getting whether that copy still works, whether it's still functional, practical, what version, what edition of it was, those can make a difference. I mean, you have some old films where the film has decayed over the past 80 years. So this was one of the problems with restoring Metropolis, that there were several copies of the film. First, there were several copies of the film. Second, some of them had started decaying, and so it wasn't until they found like some really well preserved copy of the film that was in an attic in Germany somewhere, and that's how they were able to get sort of the ultimate edition. But in many cases, Hollywood films, the old vault 35 millimeter and 8 millimeter films that were created 70, 80 years ago, the vaults were not humidity sealed, and some of that film literally fell apart. It decayed, and now there is no copy of that original film left. And so what you have are the prints, which are not going to be nearly as good. You're not going to be able to enhance off of that print. So basically, this is what was sent to a theater, or this is what was put on VHS, versus going back to the negatives and being able to take that 35 millimeter negative and turn it into something that 4K can't even handle.
Right. So unless there is enough interest in the market for them to invest in digitally restoring it, it's pretty much thumbprint, and it not even worth watching in many cases.
Could be. Yeah. Now, at the same time, like Solomon mentions, there are sites. Archive.org has a whole bunch of movies that have lapsed on copyright.
Archive.org, you said, Kevin?
Yep, archive.org. So they have a lot of books. I once went to a talk from the guy who runs the archiving there, and it is essentially what it sounds like. This is supposed to be the Internet Archive, and so it covers books basically as much as they can that is prior to 1924. The Internet Archive, yes. Books that are out of copyright, movies. Interestingly enough, there was one year where a whole bunch of movies accidentally fell out of copyright because they were not renewed after the 7-year period. And so for a short amount of time, all of those films were public domain. And the publishers tried to renew it, and court said, no, they're public domain now. You can't pull it back out of the public domain. So they've got a lot of movies that lapsed because of that, or they lapsed because the publisher went out of business. The new company forgot that, oh, we bought these movies, and oops, that kind of stuff, that does happen. So you won't necessarily get the best copies of things. You won't get, the fanciest, highest resolution versions, but they do have a lot. And like people are saying here in chat, books, you can check them out for an hour at a time. Actually, I went through Max Wertheimer's book on it was Perception, and that was something that you could check out, and it's like a library. Basically, it is like going to a library where you grab the book and you could check it out for an hour. So yeah, plus a lot of abandonware, a lot of software that, okay, well, we've lost, or we no longer care about the license for this because this was some game built in the 1980s. And the publisher, you're not going to sell another copy of it. That just happens. Not all books do require being checked out. You are correct. And a lot of them can be downloaded freely. And of course, you've got sites like the Gutenberg Project, which take all of those books that are in public domain and make them available. It's a whole project for converting them to PDFs, to EPUBs, to HTML, plain text. Great single topic or slow morphing one. Yeah, this one kind of morphed. We appreciate Tom being on here to poke us along this way, because otherwise, I did threaten people backstage that if we didn't have good topics, we were going to talk about category theory, and that would have gotten everybody else to jump off even sooner. But we are at the top of the hour, so I want to say thank you, everybody. Thank you, Tom, for coming on. Of course, you're welcome back anytime. And chat, you are also welcome to come on back. Remember, tomorrow we have Greg Lowe, who's going to talk to us about Cosmos DB. So check that out. Got a couple more presentations over the course of this month. Second, third, and fourth Tuesdays of the month. Until we see you again, everybody, take care.
All right. See ya.